Hello and welcome to my video. This video is all about the things that people don't necessarily realise within the government help. It's about the wrinkles and the peculiarities of the system and making sure that you don't fall into those traps. If you'd like to see more content like this, then please subscribe to the channel and please press the like button if you like it because that really helps me. So what are the peculiarities that are in the system? Well, I think the first and perhaps the most important is that the grants that people are receiving, the £10,000 grant for people with premises, the grant that people are getting if they're self-employed, these grants are taxable and it's quite easy to forget that they are taxable. Now, for a lot of people, there will be no tax to pay because although the income is taxable, people will have a lot of expenses. In fact, they're not going to make more money, they're going to make much less money over the furlough period. But for some people with very low costs, then the £10,000 is actually just extra income in their bank account. And don't forget, if that is you, that there is tax to pay on it. So I think that's quite an important point, and one that is fair enough, that if you have received income, that at the end of the day you should be taxed on it. Something that's I'm sure everybody will do, but is an important point, because it's a legal point, is that if you're receiving money, furloughed money, in respect to your staff, then the money you receive for furlough must go to your staff. Now, you can pay your staff first and then receive the furlough money later, but you do have to, it's a legal requirement that the money that you receive as furlough money is paid to your staff. The next thing is slightly more subtle, but it's an important principle of all the help is that you only get the help once. So for the employer's national insurance, so you can claim employer's national insurance on your furloughed workers. But for most small businesses, you also get a £4,000 allowance. So the first £4,000, which was £3,000 last year, of your employer's national insurance, you don't have to pay. But what they say is you can't have the £4,000 plus the furlough money for your national insurance, so you can't have it twice. So you can't get a refund on money that you're not paying in the first place, which seems, again, reasonably fair. However, it is important to remember that you shouldn't be claiming both, and it's quite easy to tick the box, yes, I'm claiming employer's national insurance, and yes, I want the £4,000, because it's sort of two different ones. One is part of the furlough claim, and one is part of your PAYE submission. But just please remember that one, because it's important, and it's one that I'm sure the revenue will be checking, as they should really. So then I want to talk about VAT, the VAT holiday. So up until June, we don't have to pay VAT, and we don't have to pay our self-employed tax at the end of July. But we do have to pay those amounts eventually. So we had to pay the income tax in January, and we have to pay the VAT and get up to date by 5th of April next year. Now, it is really easy to get behind with your taxes in these circumstances because, you know, we'll still have to pay VAT in the first quarter of next year, and paying 2 VAT bills might be quite tough. So I think it's really important to make sure we've got cash flows in place so that we know we can meet those bills. Now, just at the moment, we can get loans reasonably easily, and there are lots of loans available, and there's government help for loans, and it might be worthwhile making sure that you've got enough loans to cover now when we're shut down, the next few months when we're maybe partially shut down, and then making sure also that there's plenty of money to pay those tax bills. And I would make sure that you've got plenty of money, belt and braces, because we're going into an uncertain world. People also ask, will taxes rise to pay for all this money? The government seems to be handing money like confetti. This money does not come from nowhere. Will taxes rise? Well, I don't know for sure. I suspect not, because I think the way that they're going to fund this is by printing more money. And printing more money means that they don't have to tax us. So does that mean, well, this is madness, isn't it? Does this mean that the whole point of tax is of no point if they can just print it anyway? Well, I think it has I want to talk about that and the impact of that on financial markets and on inflation a little later in the video. So what sort of world are we going to come back to when we start to open up? To me, so while we're in shutdown, me and my sons are playing board games, nerdy board games. And one of them is called Age of Industries, where we reenact the industrialization of Germany. We do that in the evenings, and then there's a new game that we've started, which is like a sister game. It's very similar, called Brass, which is about the industrialisation of Lancashire. And the two games are really similar. The sort of the basic way that you play is very similar, but it's different, and you need a really different strategy to win in each game. And when we played the second one, Brass, for the first time, it was just frying our brains because we had to think completely differently to how we thought in the past. And this is how the return from shutdown is going to be, in my opinion. Our businesses are going to be somewhat like they were in the past, but completely different at the same time. And in order to win in the new business environment, we're going to have to rethink our strategy. And I think that making sure that we've done that thinking in advance is a really important way in which we're going to survive now and then thrive. And there are different ways in which this can be done. So there are different ways in which this can be done. So I think it's really important to look at your cost base and so look at mine and just think about making sure that it's flexible, so that because we may go into a position where we've got lower income and there's less business about, so having a flexible one that you can flex down, a cost base that you can flex down, I think might be really useful. I think having enough money available, I've already talked about that, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's really important. Having enough finance, because at the moment you can get finance, will you be able to in 9 months' time? I think the banks are going to be really cautious, and I think it's going to be really difficult to get loans once the government help has gone away, because I think all the trouble in getting loans over the last few weeks is because the banks have been left with 20% of the risk, and even then they're being really cautious. So what are they going to like when the government help goes away and they're going to have to take 100% of the risk? I think we know the answer. And I think also we need to plan our staff's return, because we've sort of like got used to everybody working at home, and actually planning the way that we want them to return and maybe want them to work differently, I think is crucial to making a success of all of this. So what about the financial crisis? So when we went into this, there was a full-blown financial crisis happening, and it was like we had all these bubbles, and there was a guided missile going through the bubbles, and they were exploding all over the place. And over the last few weeks, it's just gone down to nothing. You can't see it in the news. It's all gone down in calm. So what's going on? Well, this is how it works for me. All the goods and services, it's like energy. So we've got this bundle of energy, which relates to our work. So we do work, and that's represented by the goods and services in the economy. It's also represented by the businesses. So that's the stock market. The stock market is just businesses. The businesses that people have created through their own thoughts and endeavours. Those are energy. And then there's also government loans and all the loans. Government loans are just the work that we're going to do in the future and they're going to tax us on. That's how they repay government loans. So all of that energy is there. And what they've done is they've printed vast amounts of extra money. And that has calmed the markets down. But when you've got a fixed number of goods and services and businesses in the economy, when you print a whole load of money, then what happens is that some of those bubble up in increasing prices. Now, during the last financial crisis, what happened was that prices of goods and services went up a bit, but more or less kept the same. But the prices of government debt went sky high and looked like a bubble to me. The price of stock market went sky high and looks like a bubble to me. And the price of property went sky high as well. So all of that happened. And in my opinion, what's happened with all the money printing, so they've printed vast amounts of extra money, is that has kept stock market going and kept the prices higher than they would otherwise be. So what does that mean? So what does that mean in terms of investing in the future? And what should you do? What should you invest in? So what it means to me is that the stock market, what's going on with that? Well, I think that the prices of stocks and shares are really, really high, but I also think that the money printing will underpin them to some extent, and who knows, they could go higher yet, and they could remain high for some time. Government bonds, I'm quite sure that they're in the biggest bubble ever, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to bubble up more, and I think the money printing will be targeted in such a way as to keep those prices really high. So that's a huge market out there, and if you've got mutual funds, you're likely to have investments in it. Property, again, last time when they printed a whole lot of money, property went up in value, and a lot of people are talking about investing in property after the close down. So, there's no reason why that money won't go into property. But again, if it collapses down, then all of these things, property, bonds, and shares could come down. So there's all of that risk around. So what about cash? Well, the problem with cash is that you could get very high rates of inflation. So they've printed all this money, so why doesn't that create inflation? Well, it doesn't create inflation if we keep that money in our bank accounts. If we keep our money in our bank accounts, there's no inflation because it's the same number of goods and services. If we don't spend it, we're not buying more, and therefore there's no additional inflation. But it's like the toilet paper in the supermarkets. At some stage, and for no reason, I cannot understand why people went panic buying toilet paper. I do not understand it, but they did. And as soon as one person did, everybody did. And the supermarkets were out of stock for weeks. And the same can happen. That's how hyperinflation happens and high rates of inflation. People see prices ticking up, and then people think the price is going up. I better buy it while I can afford it. I better buy it before it goes up in price again. And everybody comes in, all that money leaves our bank accounts, and then we scramble for things. And that's when you get very high rates of inflation. And I can't predict. In order to predict that, you need to know what's going on in everybody's heads. So, because it's a psychological problem, not a monetary problem. So we've covered stocks and shares, very high, but could go higher. Bonds, the same. Property, to some extent, the same. Cash it seems safe, but could disappear in a flash if we get high inflation. A security, gold and silver, precious metals have been around for 6,000 years or so. So there is some security in those if you're worried about all the others going to nonsense, and that is possible, but there's security and other risks around that. I hope that this video has helped you navigate your way around what is quite a difficult area and a lot of new stuff coming in and a lot of wrinkles in the system. If you would like to subscribe to this channel to see more content, then you'd be very welcome. And having got this far, if you can press the like button, that really helps me. Thank you for watching.